You assess what's working, then you identify the opportunities and the right things to do. You start to blend in measurement and things to learn what's working so that you can ultimately do more of it. And then ending it with being, like you said, be agile, being able to respond quickly because things are moving at a fast pace.
Welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast, hosted by Bernie Borges. This is the podcast for the modern marketer who wants to hear from their peers in the trenches and the occasional analyst or rockstar influencer sharing strategies and tactics about what's working in modern marketing. Be sure to listen to the end of each episode for Bernie's summary and takeaways so you can plan your next move in your own modern marketing journey.
Hey there! Welcome to episode 276 of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. I'm Bernie Borges, CMO of Vengreso, and your host. Hey, thanks for listening. Hey, my guest on this episode is David Buffaloe, CMO at Vertical IQ. David, welcome to the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie. Excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited about our topic. I was thinking about this topic as you and I prepared for it, and I was kind of reflecting on, not that I can recall all 275 previous episodes, that's just not possible, but I don't think we've covered this topic as a dedicated topic. And so let's get right to it. We're going to talk about the challenge that I think many marketing teams have, and that's just getting things done, maximizing results with limited resources. I think every marketing leader would say they have limited resources, regardless of the size of their team. So I'm excited to talk about that. But of course, as always, I like to begin our episode with a brief introduction to your company, Vertical IQ. I love the name, by the way, but who is Vertical IQ? Tell us about the company.
Vertical IQ provides industry intelligence that helps sales professionals better understand the industries of the companies they call on and, to hopefully help them win, grow, and retain more business. You hear a lot about sales intelligence and a lot of great companies out there who provide the who, what companies you should call on, who are the key contacts. And we like to think that Vertical IQ takes that a little bit further with the what. What's happening in those industries? What are the trends, the risks, the challenges, and kind of help those sales professionals prepare for those interactions with those prospects and customers.
Love it. Those are great insights that every sales professional can benefit from. So you're the CMO there, and obviously, I think we know what a CMO does, but give us a little context for what you're doing there, and any background on how you got there in your career journey.
I joined Vertical IQ just about 7 months ago as the CMO, and my key responsibilities, like most CMOs, is about driving the business and ultimately delivering the right programs to help grow the business. My role tends to overlap between marketing and sales development. But my passion has always been about helping early stage companies grow through integrated marketing and as well as sales development. I've been in marketing almost 25 years now, and again, mostly with early stage startup tech companies. And again, that's just my passion, is helping them grow from that early stage, building a team, growing a team, helping the company grow, and attack new verticals and things like that.
I love the fact that sales development is a part of that. I think that is so akin to modern marketing. Modern marketing has to have sales development baked into it. So the fact that you're a living, breathing example of that, as so many of my guests on this podcast are, that's fantastic. And of course, the last thing you said, I think, is really a great segue to the meat of our topic today. And that is how do marketing organizations get things done, get results with limited resources. And it all starts with the team, right? So why don't we start there? What's the role of the team in getting things done?
When I come to an early stage company, one of the first things I like to do is kind of put my marketing hat on and assess the business, understand the needs, understand the audience that they're selling to or their customers. And then you start to ask yourself questions like, what kind of content is needed? How much content? What's the right type of content? Think about creating demand, and is there opportunities there to drive more pipeline and things like that? Ask yourself about the brand. Are there awareness opportunities? Think about how do people feel about that brand? from an identity, from a name, from the colors and the visuals that you use. And then you start to talk about thought leadership. How can I use thought leadership or PR or byline articles and those types of communications to really support the business and grow that business? And then, as you said before, sales development, that's another key area that I think is really an opportunity for early stage and small teams. One of the things when I got Vertical IQ was identifying that there was marketing happening, they were generating some leads, and all those inbound leads were kind of just getting thrown over the wall and handed over to the sales team. And really what we wanted was to let the sales team really focus on the things that they're good at and giving them those leads at the right time. And so we really started to think about that and started to put in place a sales development team to help that process, be that first touch.
So are you saying
leads.
that the sales development team then was part of your team in marketing? Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I'm a big proponent of it living in marketing. And I think it does a couple of things. One, it helps with that connection between the marketing department and the sales department, right? Because they're all kind of working on this together. And I like having it in marketing because it kind of ensures that marketing takes the onus of the quality of the leads, not just throwing stuff over the wall, like I said, but really truly giving the sales the right things at the right time. And, I always say that, building pipeline truly is a team sport.
Absolutely. You mentioned early stage because that's really where you are now with Vertical IQ, right? Is kind of early stage?
We've been around 8 or so years, early stage in terms of number of employees and really seeing growth with our customer base and wanting to expand that into some new verticals.
Okay. So in the context of the team, do you look at it from the standpoint of building the team, or you actually started the conversation on this topic, David, of assessing where things are? So do you start with assessing the team and then kind of building out the team? Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
One of the important aspects of kind of building a team, starts with the people and understanding what are those specific skill sets that you need that will complement not just you, but also what needs to be done. And when we talked about some of those things when you asked those questions early on. And then, what do you do when you build that team to truly take care of them? I think from my standpoint, kind of a highlight of my career has really been about building an amazing network of kind of excellent marketing professionals. Each kind of have their own unique skills, willing to do whatever it takes to support each other, support me, and kind of the overall support of the team, as well as the company. As a leader, you're able to see the bigger picture. Small teams are constantly under pressure. You have to respect and encourage that team, support them professionally and personally, and achieve a much higher productivity with a happier team. That's just something that I've kind of prided myself on in terms of building teams and building that network of people. I have this tendency to bring people along with me, and it just says a lot for their skill sets and how we complement each other and how we really believe in the same things. And to me, doing that and supporting that team is really what makes you, a strong leader.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And well said, David. Well said. And, I think we've all seen examples, good and maybe not so good in some cases, but I've seen more good than not so good of bringing people along with you that, you've worked with before, and you know each other, you know what your skills are, you know how to get things done. And when that happens, oftentimes in a really positive way, a lot of good things can happen in building out that team. In the context of this whole topic, how does a marketing leader like yourself get results with limited resources? Because again, let's face it, we're always going to say we have limited resources because we've got so much we want to get done. But how do we prioritize? Because we have so much we want to get done, right? We've got branding, we've got demand gen, we've got the reality of the COVID-19 world that we're all living in. So how do you determine priorities and how do you manage to priorities?
The key word there really is the priorities, right? You can't do everything, and you can't do everything well. So, picking those right priorities, and balancing the difference between the long-term needs and the short-term impact you can make. And again, I think it goes back to, I talked about an assessment early on, and based on that assessment, that helps you drive those priorities. So, for example, generating pipeline. I don't know a company out there where marketing's not tasked with generating pipeline. right? And so that's typically something you need to think about. So when you start thinking about pipeline, you start to ask yourself, again, questions around content. What are the specific campaigns that we should be running to help drive that pipeline? And you have to know the audience and find the right places to reach them. I had an old colleague of mine that always used the term, find those watering holes. Where does your audience go to get their information, and make sure you're there so you can be seen and to drive that pipeline or that interest and that engagement. We talked a lot about sales development earlier. That's a place, again, that's a great way to support generating pipeline. Then you start to think about, when's the right time to introduce automation? But ultimately, you have to be agile, right? And agile is really important with a small marketing team, or really any marketing team. There is no set it and forget it. Things just change too quickly.
No kidding. I mean, we're of course living in that now as we're recording this in late April timeframe, 2020. Yeah, things are changing almost by the day, or sometimes by the hour. So you just mentioned introducing the right automation, and in the context of being agile, how do we balance that? Because I know just the world that I live in at Vengreso, there's automation tools that we use, and there are times when it feels overwhelming because there's so many tools that we're trying to use, and so a lot of times it's really all about getting results, like you said, generating pipeline. So how do you balance that, introducing the right automation, especially when you're in an early stage marketing organization?
The big question you have to ask yourself is knowing when to automate, because you can automate too much and it can actually hurt your efficiency and your effectiveness. But you have to have automation in the right places, and balancing that with the personalization that will drive the best results. So understanding what's needed for your specific situation. It starts with understanding the audience and understanding that buyer's journey, and what are the different steps along the journey, and when can you automate? From my experience, I've seen success when you automate things kind of early on. That first touch, someone downloads something off of your website or signs up for a webinar, and you want to automate those initial touches right off the bat. Make sure they get something in their hands. They know who to connect with if they want to advance the conversation. There's nice tools now to offer the ability to schedule a meeting right off the bat. Yep. So those people who are really ready, give them the ability to do something quickly from an automation standpoint. But then separately, as you progress through that journey, also seen great success with kind of nurturing programs. So someone came in and they're not ready to buy, but you want to stay top of mind with them. And nurturing programs are great for doing that. And you can personalize those things based on things such as, knowing their industry, or knowing the size of the organization, or maybe even the title of the individual you're communicating with. So automate those things, and especially as you're nurturing them.
We've made reference to the fact that we're living in the world of COVID. So is there anything that you've experienced here recently that you can speak to that would be an example of maybe shifting priorities, or, you used the phrase agile, you got to be agile. So is there anything that you've done at Vertical IQ that you would say is an example of being agile as a result of the heightened awareness of everybody living in the world of COVID-19?
Yeah, absolutely. And, again, being agile is about being able to respond quickly. And as you said, things are changing now more so than ever before. And, just recently, Vertical IQ, again, part of what we provide is information on industries and how industries are changing and different things like that. And we saw an opportunity really to kind of all hands on deck. We just shifted the entire business and became more of what we would consider a monitoring business, monitoring those industries that we cover and being able to provide customers, but also non-customers, with a free website that talks about, how are industries being affected by the COVID-19? What are the big changes happening with those industries, and what type of information can an individual use to really support the small and medium-sized businesses that are out there. They need a lot of help right now. And by knowing what's specifically happening in those industries gives you the opportunity to have a much better conversation, understand what's keeping them up at night. So we created this free website that allows people to go and see what's happening, within the economy, also key industry sectors, but also the specific industries. And again, truly understanding what's happening there, how they're being affected. And again, to support those small and medium-sized businesses that really have a
That's
need.
awesome, David. So give us the URL so that we can share it.
Absolutely. So it's verticaliq.com/COVID-19. If you go to verticaliq.com, right at the top of the homepage, there's a banner there that will take you to that page. And again, it's completely free. We're updating it almost on a daily basis to give you the latest and greatest of what's going on and to help you with those conversations with those small and medium-sized businesses.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And of course, my listener knows, David, that we will link that up in the show notes page at our website at Vengreso.com. So thank you for that. And I have visited it, and it's very, very insightful. In fact, I've already shared it with a few people. So yeah, that's awesome.
That's great.
You reminded me of something on this whole topic. As we talked about the importance of building a team and being very agile. When we're agile and we have to maybe shift priorities a little bit, because we talked about priorities, sometimes it calls into question the skills that are needed in order to shift and focus on perhaps a different set of priorities, or perhaps just a slightly different set of priorities, or maybe even more than a slightly different set of priorities. It might be a very different set of priorities. So how do you balance then the fact that, do we have the right skills? What are the skills that we need in order to address and get results on these priorities?
As a small marketing team, I've never really met a marketing person, and you alluded to this earlier, that's ever said, "Oh, I've got plenty of budget. I've got plenty of resources. I don't need anything else." That just doesn't happen, right? So you're typically starting lean, and you want to get the most out of every dollar you spend. So you want to find ways to do a lot with a little. And sometimes, again, that starts with proving things that work. And then as they work, do more of them. When I'm building a team and thinking about the skills, I like to look at it, and I tend to blend generalists with some specialists. You have that opportunity of determining when's the best time to outsource things and when you need specialization versus certain highly demanded skills might be something you want to bring in-house. I think of myself as kind of more of a generalist. I like to kind of be that project manager or that quarterback. And so you can really leverage additional resources from an outsourcing standpoint with key areas.
Okay. And then in terms of bringing skills in-house, what are the kinds of things that, what are the criteria that you use to determine when you work with someone, say, outside the organization as a contractor or an agency, whatever the case may be, versus skills that you want on your team in-house?
You'll start lean, right? You'll start small. And as you see things starting to work, then you want to do more of it. And that's the point at which I've typically seen the best time to bring those resources in-house. Consider some examples. You may start with some webinars. And again, depending on the size of your team, you may need some help outsourcing that, managing the logistics and hosting and doing things like that. So starting there, but as you see those things start to progress, so you see opportunities to do more of them, you might want to bring that in-house. Some other areas is paid advertising. A lot of times a smaller company is going to have a smaller budget, and you want to start. And before you invest heavily in, a full-time person managing this for you, there's great ways to outsource that and have those specific skill sets for somebody who's a specialist in it to help you identify, what's the real opportunity there. And the right places to use, from a standpoint of your budget. And then as that you show success and it grows, then consider bringing that in-house. And, the other is content marketing. Content marketing to me has always been a great place to start with external resources. There's great writers out there, find the right person, make sure that, you can help them understand your business, your tone, your message, your audience. But then they become a great resource. We do a lot for our blog and other things. You get on the phone for 15 minutes and tell them, here's this idea, here's the theme, here are the key points. And as you go work on other things, someone's working on developing a draft of that blog post. You can come in, refine that, edit it, post it, and you're ready to go. But ultimately, it really is about how do you leverage everything that you do to get the most out of it.
The most out of the skills, whether they're internal on your team or external, or in most cases, a blend of the two. So
absolutely,
there's a little bit of art, a little bit of science behind making the decisions on when to bring some of those skills in house. It's kind of my takeaway on the way you frame that up, David. So well said. Let's talk about something that I can almost never get through an episode without talking about measurement, measuring results in marketing, right? That's always a topic in marketing. So how are you doing that when you are building a team and you are focused on really getting the most out of the resources that you have, which we're saying in this whole conversation, we're saying we know we have limited resources. So what are the things that we're going to measure?
Measurement is one of those things. It's they're great, but you can also get kind of in the minutia sometimes, and it takes you off course. So I like to think of measurement from a standpoint of don't get caught up in what I would consider, or many people call the vanity metrics. Those that look good on paper, but don't really drive success of the business. Those are things like, how many leads did you get? I mean, how often do we get that question, right? How many leads came in this month? How many social followers do we have? Or what about our website? How many hits are we getting? How many impressions are we seeing? Those are all things that they're nice to have. And marketing uses that, but I don't think those are the important ones. I tend to try and focus more on what I would consider impact metrics or actionable metrics, and that's things like we talked about the buyer's journey. So really looking at that buyer's journey and saying, what are the conversion metrics? How many things are converting from one stage to the next? And what that helps you define is, where do you have problems within the journey? Maybe mid-journey, there's challenge and things are getting stuck, right? And that can help you determine what content should you create to help move a prospect along the process, or maybe it's at the end of the buyer's journey and we just can't seem to get them over the line and get that contract signed. And so maybe you have to think about content that helps create tools for that internal champion that you've already sold that's trying to sell it internally. Give them the right things to use to help them sell it internally. Mm-hmm. So look at those conversion metrics. I'm a big proponent of looking at, how many opportunities have you created? How much of those opportunities have turned into pipeline? Mm-hmm. So how much is marketing generated pipeline? And then, looking at deals that close, and your contribution to closed one. That's a big thing. I do believe marketing really should have metrics that specifically tie them to revenue, because that's where you ultimately want to drop the results.
It's interesting, David, because we're coming back to a topic we discussed about 15 minutes ago in this conversation, and that's automation. Like, you can't measure everything you just mentioned without having the automation in place. So how are you measuring those things you call the impact metrics from the standpoint of using automation and doing that in a way that is going to scale as you grow?
To me, there's certain systems you need. So there's things like your CRM system, and marketing should be very involved in that process of, setting up that CRM, making sure it aligns with the buyer's journey so that you can track those measures and see what's happening along the way. So there's things there that you definitely want to do. Marketing automation and connecting that with your CRM, you can do that early on. There's experts out there. If you want to outsource that, bringing in a systems person is critical if measurement's going to be important to you. So, using that automation, and again, we talked a little bit about when is the right time. And I think early on, having some automation with those first touches, nurturing programs, but be smart about how you automate and don't over automate. One of the things we do, and I've done at other organizations, is, have a blend between your inbound marketing and your outbound marketing. You want to identify some of those top targeted accounts. Typically, it's going to be less than 100 of those, for a rep that really owns those. Give the rep the tools and things they need, but those touches really need to be personalized. And so I would lean away from automation for those types of accounts, whereas automation can be really used on those early touches for inbound.
I love what the point you're making about having a blend between inbound and outbound and having targeted accounts, because it's so important to be able to give salespeople the ammunition that they need to go after those targeted accounts. And that needs that marketing collaboration and the data and the insights and then the content and just all the things that marketing can provide from a value standpoint, and then partnering up with sales to enable the sales team to go after those targeted accounts. And then again, you've got that blend of both inbound and outbound. And then you could be measuring, like you said, what's impacting the business, what percentage of it is inbound, what percentage of it is outbound. Let's do more or less of either or, depending on what we're seeing in terms of the data.
Absolutely.
David, I think we're at a point in this episode where I'm going to do my recap, and then I'm going to ask you to just comment on my recap, meaning fill in any holes or just add anything you want to add, and then we'll ask you for a closing thought and your contact information, and we'll wrap up this episode. We began our conversation with a brief introduction to your company, Vertical IQ. I remarked that I love the name, a cool name, and that you're really in the business of providing industry intelligence for sales professionals so that they can better understand the industries that they're calling on and really identify like what's happening within those industries so salespeople can be just better informed and be more effective in their selling activities. You're fairly new with the company. You said you've only been on board less than a year, and you really love driving the business and helping drive programs that grow the business. You've got a passion, you said, David, for early stage companies where you say it's about integrated marketing, sales development, and then, of course, building the team to get results. And hey, that's what we talked about here today is how do you get results with limited resources? We started with the topic of building the team. You said, hey, let's assess where they are first, identify the opportunities, identify who's the audience we're trying to reach, what are we doing to reach that audience today, what's the content that we currently have, what are we doing for demand gen, what are we doing for branding, and just see what's needed to get to the next stage. You also said that it's important to include sales development as part of your marketing team so that you can really provide that connection between marketing and sales and contribute to building the pipeline. And that's an important part of the marketing team that you're building there is that sales development function. You also mentioned that marketing has to take ownership of the quality of the lead, and having a sales development function within marketing is certainly one way to really help you manage that. You said that it's really important in building a team to find good people, take really great care of them, know what specific skill sets you need, and then really just be there to support each other. And then, you said that teams are always under a lot of pressure. And so by working with a team in a way that's mutually respectful and supporting each other, you can really get a lot accomplished. And we talked about priorities. I loved your opening remark on this. I wrote it down. You said you can't do everything. I can relate to that, David. So you've got to really be balancing. What are the things that you can do that are going to have an impact on the pipeline, and know when to introduce automation, what kind of automation to use, know what to do with it. Don't over automate. Make sure that you're baking it into the buyer's journey. And then you talked about the importance of being agile and being able to move very quickly. Obviously, the world that we're in now, the COVID world, you gave a great example of, things are really all hands on deck in the current COVID environment, and how you built a free website that's available to everybody. And that's verticaliq.com/COVID-19. And it's a website that provides insights on the industries that are affected by COVID-19, so that anybody that can, access that content there can gain some valuable insights into what's going on in specific industries and how they're impacted by COVID. We talked a lot about the team. We kind of came back and forth on team and automation, and how you said, you've got to start lean and you've got to have a mix of generalists and specialists. And sometimes you outsource certain functions, and sometimes you determine when it makes sense to bring some of those skills in-house, things like webinars, paid advertising, content marketing. Again, you can maybe start outside, and then at some point where you determine you really need to kind of triple down on that, bring those skills in-house. We talked about measurement, one of my favorite topics. I think every marketer's one of their favorite topics. I love your point about don't get caught up in the vanity metrics, but instead focus on impact metrics, conversion metrics along the buyer's journey, for example, knowing where in the buyer's journey you're either doing really well or not so well, and you need to, do something a little bit different. What kind of opportunities are you creating? What kind of pipeline are you generating? And what is the contribution that you're making to close one, which you call marketing generated revenue? We came full circle back to automation again, and you said CRM is just fundamental. It's baseline. Marketing should be involved in rolling that out, and also just identifying what the kinds of things you're going to measure in CRM, knowing what to automate, knowing when to automate, and making sure that you've got a good blend of both inbound and outbound as it relates to your automation. So using your automation effectively for the right personalization based on things like industry size, that kind of thing, title, but then also when you're doing account-based marketing or targeted marketing to targeted accounts, arming the salespeople with the information that they need and being able to track all that within your automation system so that, again, you're partnering with sales to equip them with tools that they need, the content that they need, the information that they need to target those accounts and win in those accounts. I think I'll leave my summary there. David, is there anything that you would like to add?
I think of it and you think of those steps, you start, you assess it, right? You assess what's working, then you identify the opportunities and the right things to do. You start to blend in measurement and things to learn what's working so that you can ultimately do more of it. And then ending it with being, like you said, be agile, being able to respond quickly because things are moving at a fast pace.
Cool. Any closing thought before we bring things to a wrap?
No, it's been great. I really appreciate you having me here. And, just a final thought. It's a quote that I really love. It comes from a country song, so don't hold that against me. But, the quote is, some believe in destiny, some believe in fate. I believe that happiness is something we create. So from my perspective, my advice is to, find your passion, love what you do, surround yourself with the people that believe in you, that you believe in, that you really want to work with. And that ultimately is what's going to drive your success and keep you motivated throughout your career.
Love it. Find your passion. And I know it's cliches, but people say that, if you're doing something you really love doing, you're really not working, you just because you're doing what you love doing. So I think that kind of goes hand in hand with that quote. So that's fantastic. David, last thing is, where can people connect with you online so they can stay in touch with you and everything you've got going on?
Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's David Buffaloe with an E on the end, just to help you there. And then also, of course, through Twitter, my handle is dbuffalo.
Fantastic. Well, again, David, my listener knows that along with your website will be linked up in our show notes page. So on that note, David, I want to thank you so much for joining me here for this invigorating conversation on this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast.
Thanks, Bernie.
Hey, that's a wrap for this episode of the Modern Marketing Engine podcast. If you're not subscribed yet, I invite you to hit the subscribe button on your favorite podcast player. We're available on all the popular podcast listening channels. And hey, I'd love it if you would give the Modern Marketing Engine podcast a rating or review in Apple Podcasts. That really helps others to discover it. We publish a show notes page for every episode with links to the resources that were mentioned during the interview. Just visit our podcast page at Vengreso.com, and that's Vengreso. And remember, just one S in Vengreso. Hey, while you're there, sign up to get the podcast delivered to your inbox each week. And be sure to check out the Modern Selling Podcast, hosted by our CEO, Mario Martinez Jr. Hey, I hope that you'll tune in again next week for another inspiring interview to help you thrive on your modern marketing journey.